So there is this deeply strange biological paradox built right into the human operating system. And it's actually the only physiological function we have where the harder you try to do it, the less likely it is to happen.
Oh, yeah, it's incredibly frustrating.
Right. I mean, think about it. If you want to lift a heavy weight, you recruit more muscle fibers through like conscious effort. If you need to solve a complex math problem, you focus your prefrontal cortex, you actively concentrate.
Yeah, effort yields results. That's how we're wired.
Exactly. But the very moment you apply that exact same executive effort to falling asleep, you just completely destroy the mechanism. Like the intention to sleep actually prevents sleep.
It does. It's often referred to in the clinical literature as sleep effort. And it's just a fascinating evolutionary quirk.
Sleep effort, I like that term.
Yeah, well, the very act of commanding your brain to power down, it requires the activation of your executive control networks. The parts of your brain responsible for problem solving and vigilance.
So you're basically turning on the machine to tell the machine to turn off.
Precisely. You are essentially using the accelerator to try and force the car into park. It's neurologically impossible to force a state of non-arousal through an aroused state of sheer will.
Which perfectly explains the absolute mental gridlock we all experience at night. You know the feeling. You lie down in the dark, the external distractions are gone, and suddenly you were just painfully aware that your brain is spinning its wheels.
Yeah, you're trying so hard to relax that you literally become anxious about not relaxing.
Exactly. And that biological trap is exactly what brings us to our source material for today's deep dive. So if you're listening, I'd suggest you just get really comfortable, grab a blanket, settle in, because today's session is all about winding down. We are going to be looking at a beautiful guided meditation text titled First Night, A Gentle Encounter with Yourself.
It's a really short, incredibly delicate piece of writing.
It is. But we aren't just going to read it to you. Our mission today is to slowly deconstruct the exact biological, psychological, and neurological levers that this script pulls to bypass that sleep effort paradox we just talked about.
Because when you look closely at this text, you realize it is not merely a collection of soothing words. It's really a highly engineered sequence of cognitive off-ramps.
Right. It systematically addresses the physical body, then the autonomic nervous system, and finally those cognitive loops of self-criticism that keep us awake. It attempts to trick the brain into doing what it cannot be forced to do.
So let's look at how it initiates that sequence, because the sequencing is vital.
Yeah, let's dive into it. The text begins with an intensely physical set of instructions. It says, good evening, dear friend. Put aside the busyness in your hands, turn off the surrounding noise, completely relax your body.
And then it asks you to stick close to the earth and feel its steady support.
Right. And my initial thought reading this was about the sequence of subtraction. Like,
That's
it doesn't ask you to clear your mind first, it asks you to clear the physical runway.
And that's so important because the brain is fundamentally an organ of prediction. It relies on bottom-up sensory data. I mean, you cannot cognitive reframe your way out of stress if your somatic nervous system is still sending threat signals to the brain.
That makes total sense.
Yeah. So let's look at that phrase, feel the earth's steady support. From a biomechanical perspective, for the 16 or so hours you are awake, your body is engaged in a continuous microscopic battle against gravity.
Even when we don't realize it.
Exactly. Your vestibular system in your inner ear, the proprioceptors in your joints, the muscle spindles in your core, they are constantly firing. They're sending signals to the cerebellum to make these minute adjustments just to keep you upright.
So even if you are just, sitting at a desk all day, your muscles are under tension just to maintain your posture against the downward pull of the earth.
Right. You are essentially engaged in a low-grade perpetual resistance exercise.
I always think about that feeling when you've been on a long hike with a really heavy backpack, and you finally take it off, and you have that overwhelming physical relief. You only realize how tense you were once the weight is actually gone.
That is a perfect analogy, because that constant stream of proprioceptive data tells the reticular activating system in your brainstem, hey, we are upright, we are interacting with the world, maintain vigilance.
Wow, so we have to consciously tell it we're done.
Yeah. When the text instructs you to lie down and actively notice the steady support of the earth, it's directing your conscious attention to the cessation of that effort. It's asking you to realize that the structural integrity of the floor or the bed has completely taken over the job of resisting gravity.
It's like an aircraft's active noise-canceling system. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, how so?
Well, In order to keep the cabin quiet, the system has to constantly output a counter frequency that perfectly matches the engine noise. But the moment the engines actually shut off, the active noise cancellation has to turn off too. Otherwise, it would just be broadcasting this loud, low-frequency hum into an empty room.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. When we lie down, our brain is often still broadcasting that counter frequency to gravity. We're holding tension in our jaw, our shoulders, our lower back like we're still standing. The text is prompting us to turn off the active noise cancellation because the engines have actually stopped.
That captures the mechanical cessation beautifully. But I'd argue there's actually a deeper evolutionary layer at work here, specifically regarding the amygdala.
The fear center, right?
Exactly. The amygdala is constantly scanning for environmental stability. So when you consciously acknowledge that the ground beneath you is solid and unyielding, that it's fully supporting your mass, you're sending a massive, undeniable signal of environmental safety to the limbic system.
You're confirming you're safe?
Right. You are confirming that you are not falling, you're not in motion, and you do not need to be prepared for sudden physical action.
It's basically the physiological definition of surrender. You are relinquishing the task of holding yourself together.
Exactly.
And once the text establishes that grounding, it introduces an auditory element, but it describes it in a very peculiar way. It says, "The lingering sound of the singing bowl gently sounds like a wisp of gentle moonlight wrapping your whole body."
Yeah, the cross-modal sensory language there is just extraordinary. It translates an acoustic phenomenon into a visual and tactile one.
The synesthesia of it is fascinating, and I have a theory on why the author chose the specific imagery of moonlight instead of just saying, a relaxing tone.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
I think it relates to circadian biology. If we think about human evolution, sunlight is a highly demanding stimulus. The moment high-lux blue spectrum light hits the melanopsin receptors in our retinas, it triggers this immediate biological cascade.
Right, it suppresses melatonin and spikes cortisol.
Exactly. It basically commands the body to begin foraging, working, or migrating. Sunlight is intrinsically tied to expectation and metabolic cost.
That's a very solid physiological baseline. Sunlight demands interaction. Moonlight, conversely, operates on entirely different biological and psychological parameters.
Because it's reflected light.
Yes, because it's reflected, it lacks the intensity to trigger that melanopsin cortisol cascade. It allows for scotopic vision, which is our low-light, rod-dominant eyesight, and that type of vision is inherently softer. It lacks the sharp edge detection of daylight vision.
So by comparing the sound of the singing bowl to moonlight, the text is essentially hijacking our evolutionary association with nocturnal safety.
Absolutely. It's framing the sound not as an alarm or a call to action, but as a benign covering. It paints the environment as fundamentally low stakes.
And we shouldn't overlook the tactile verb used in that sentence either. It says the moonlight is wrapping your whole body.
Yes, wrapping. Because a singing bowl produces sound through prolonged physical vibration. It creates a standing wave that you can quite literally feel in your chest cavity if you're close enough.
Right. It's not a sharp transient sound like a snare drum. It's a sustained resonance.
And so the text uses that concept of being wrapped to create a cognitive boundary. It is drawing a perimeter around you as the listener. Inside the wrap of the sound, there is the supported body. Outside the wrap is the chaotic, demanding world.
Wow. So we have built a remarkably secure foundation here. The body has surrendered its fight against gravity, the amygdala has registered environmental stability, and the sensory input has been categorized as a safe, protective boundary.
And only now, after the physical state is entirely anchored, does the text attempt to interact with the cognitive state.
Right. It smoothly transitions to the mind, and it establishes an immediate, highly difficult rule for this mental space. It says, no judgment, no expectations.
Which brings us face-to-face with the default mode network.
The DH.
Yes. Because when you remove external sensory tasks, when you stop reading emails, talking to people, navigating physical space, your brain does not simply shut down.
Unfortunately.
Right. Instead, the default mode network powers up. This is a network of interacting brain regions that is highly active during wakeful rest, and its primary function is self-referential thought.
It's the part of us that replays memories, simulates future scenarios, and assesses our social standing.
Exactly. It is essentially the brain's idle process. but its idle process is almost entirely focused on our insecurities and unresolved tasks.
And that is exactly why reading the instruction no judgment feels almost violently counterintuitive. I mean, how do you instruct a prediction machine to stop predicting?
It's incredibly difficult.
If I'm lying in bed, right, and I'm remembering a highly critical comment my boss made that day, my brain is simulating a dozen ways that comment could affect my future employment. It feels biologically irresponsible to just apply no judgment to what feels like a genuine threat to my survival.
Well, it feels irresponsible because the limbic system cannot differentiate between a physical threat, like a predator, and a modern social threat, like a perceived failure at work.
They both trigger adrenaline and cortisol.
Right. But the text's approach to this is incredibly precise. Notice it does not say, stop thinking about your day.
True.
It explicitly acknowledges those feelings. It says, this day you may be tired, maybe anxious, maybe with a trace of unfinished regret. But it doesn't matter. At this moment, we don't chase, don't resist.
Don't chase, don't resist. It's asking for observational distance rather than suppression.
Yes, and that distinction between suppression and observation is the absolute crux of modern cognitive behavioral therapy. If you attempt to suppress a thought, if you tell yourself, I must stop thinking about my boss's comment because I need to sleep, you are paradoxically increasing the salience of that thought.
You've just tagged the thought as a threat.
Exactly. The brain's monitoring systems will now constantly check in like,
Yeah.
are we still thinking about the boss? Yes, we are. We are failing to sleep. Increase arousal.
Oh, it's an internal acoustic feedback loop. It's like putting a microphone too close to a speaker.
Oh, that's a great way to picture it.
Yeah, like the microphone picks up a tiny bit of ambient noise, amplifies it through the speaker, picks up the amplified noise, and amplifies it again until you get that deafening, high-pitched screech. In this case, the initial noise is the anxiety. The amplifier is the judgment that the anxiety is preventing sleep. And the resulting screech is a full-blown insomnia panic attack.
That mechanical analogy works so well because the only way to break a feedback loop is to separate the microphone from the speaker. You cannot easily stop the speaker from producing sound, but you can change the spatial relationship.
Right.
Don't chase, don't resist is the cognitive equivalent of moving the microphone away. You allow the thought, the anxiety, the regret to exist in the room, but you stop feeding it through the amplifier of your own judgment. You neutralize its threat value by simply letting it occur without trying to fix it.
It's like letting a glass of muddy water just sit perfectly still on a table until the dirt naturally settles to the bottom, rather than frantically trying to scoop the dirt out with a spoon.
Exactly. And the vehicle the text uses to let that mud settle, to facilitate this separation, is respiration.
Yes, the breathing exercise.
Yeah.
But it frames the act of breathing in a way that layers deep psychological intent over a baseline physiological function.
It does.
It instructs. Take a deep breath. Breathe in the tranquility and tenderness of the late night. Slowly exhale. Exhale all the tension and fatigue. Let every inhalation become nourishment and every exhalation become a release.
So we really need to examine the physiological mechanics of respiration here to understand why this specific metaphor is so potent. Breathing is unique. It's the only autonomic function that we can easily take conscious control over.
Right, because your heart beats, your stomach digests, your liver filters blood all without your conscious input.
And largely beyond your direct control. But your breath spans both the autonomic and the somatic nervous systems. It is the bridge.
So by consciously manipulating our breath, we are literally grabbing the steering wheel of the autonomic nervous system.
Precisely. And specifically, the text emphasizes a slow exhalation. This is key. When you inhale, your diaphragm moves down, your lungs expand, and this actually slightly compresses your heart. Your heart rate naturally speeds up a tiny bit to compensate.
Right.
But when you exhale slowly, the diaphragm moves up, the lungs deflate, and the vagus nerve is stimulated.
And the vagus nerve is the main superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system, isn't it?
It is, and that stimulation releases acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that directly slows the heart rate and lowers blood pressure.
So the physical, mechanical act of a slow exhalation is literally signaling the body to enter the rest and digest state.
Yes.
But what really strikes me is the cognitive overlay. The text doesn't just ask you to exhale, it asks you to conceptualize the exhalation as releasing tension and fatigue and the inhalation as absorbing nourishment. This feels like a top-down cognitive modulation of a bottom-up physical process.
It's a process of somatic mapping. When you are highly anxious, your interoceptive awareness, which is your ability to feel the internal state of your body, often becomes hyper-focused on negative sensations. You feel the tightness in your chest, the shallowness of your breath.
You fixate on it.
Yeah. So by labeling the inhalation as nourishment from that nocturnal environment we established earlier, and the exhalation as the physical expulsion of regret, the text gives the prefrontal cortex a concrete positive task.
Oh, I see.
It occupies the executive function that was previously fueling that sleep effort we talked about at the very beginning.
You are giving the brain a job to do that actively facilitates relaxation rather than a job that prevents it. You are visualizing the metabolic exchange of gases as an emotional exchange. You are literally breathing out the biological markers of the day's stress.
It's brilliant. And once that physiological shift is underway, once the vagal tone is increased, the heart rate variability is optimized, and the default mode network is no longer catastrophizing, the text introduces what I consider the absolute core of its psychological intervention.
This really is the climax of the piece. The physical and mental groundwork has all been leading to this specific affirmation. The text shifts tone, speaks directly to you, the listener, and says, remember, you don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to be perfect in everything. You at this moment are the best you, worthy of being treated gently and worthy of having this moment of peace.
Wow. We really have to unpack the heavy cultural and psychological baggage attached to that word perfect.
Oh, absolutely.
In contemporary society, particularly in highly industrialized, productivity-focused cultures, human worth is just routinely conflated with utility.
Yeah.
We operate under an internalized, hyper-vigilant capitalism where every waking hour must be optimized.
It's exhausting.
It is. If you had a day where you procrastinated, where you felt anxious, or where you failed to meet some social or professional obligation, the brain essentially categorizes that as a survival failure.
Because in our evolutionary past, failing the tribe meant exile, and exile meant death. So today, failing to send an important email feels, to the limbic system, like a literal threat to our fundamental safety. And we carry that perceived threat right into bed with us.
Yes, we do.
We use the time right before sleep to conduct this relentless audit of our flaws. It's like a highlight reel of our daily mistakes.
And it is a form of self-flagellation that we mistakenly believe is necessary for growth. We operate under this delusion that if we are hard enough on ourselves tonight, we will somehow be more disciplined and perfect tomorrow.
But neurologically, that's terrible for sleep, isn't it?
It is disastrous. When you criticize yourself, you activate the exact same threat defense system, the amygdala and the sympathetic nervous system that you would if a stranger were attacking you in an alley.
Wait, really? The exact same system?
The exact same. You are flooding your own bloodstream with cortisol, making sleep biologically impossible.
You are literally the predator and the prey in the exact same moment.
That's a profound way to put it, yes.
So the text's intervention here is to completely short-circuit that dynamic. It says, the current you is the best you. It doesn't say the you who finished the to-do list or the you who will be better tomorrow. It is validating the tired, anxious, perhaps deeply flawed version of you that is currently lying in the dark.
And this is the neurological mechanism of self-compassion. The research of psychologists, like Kristen Neff, shows that while self-criticism activates the threat system, self-compassion activates the mammalian caregiving system.
Oh, interesting.
It's an entirely different neural pathway associated with the release of oxytocin and endorphins. And oxytocin acts as a powerful buffer against cortisol. It downregulates the fear response and induces feelings of safety, warmth, and connection.
So by explicitly stating that you are worthy of being treated gently, the script is prompting you to generate your own oxytocin. It's removing the conditional requirement for rest.
Exactly.
You don't have to earn this peace by being strong or productive. The simple fact of your existence in this moment makes you worthy of it.
And that removal of conditionality is what finally resolves the sleep effort paradox we discussed initially. The paradoxical intention of trying to sleep is fueled by the belief that sleep is a task you must successfully execute.
Right, like it's an item on a checklist.
Yes, but by declaring that you do not need to be perfect, the text dissolves the task entirely. There is nothing left to execute. There is no standard to meet. The striving ceases.
Which leads perfectly into the final instruction of the text. With the threat system deactivated and the mammalian care system engaged, it wishes that the sound of the singing bowl helps you drop all your defenses, gently embrace yourself, and tonight, sleep peacefully.
Drop all your defenses. That's a big ask, but so necessary.
Yeah.
Throughout the day, psychological defenses are necessary. We use intellectualization, compartmentalization, emotional suppression, just to navigate the complexities of our workplaces and social circles. But those defenses require a massive amount of metabolic energy to maintain. The transition into sleep requires the complete lowering of those
You
shields.
just can't sleep in armor.
Precisely. You cannot enter the vulnerable state of unconsciousness if your brain believes the armor is still required.
Hmm.
The entire sequence of this text has been a systematic proof to the brain that the armor can be removed.
It's incredible. If we look at the overarching architecture of what we've just discussed, it really is a masterclass in human downregulation. We didn't just read a bedtime story. We traced a precise biological and cognitive off-ramp.
We really did.
We started by grounding the proprioceptive system, shifting the brain's association with gravity to turn off the physical vigilance. We used cross-modal sensory imagery, that moonlight, to frame the environment as a low-lux, non-demanding safe zone.
Right.
We encountered the default mode network and used non-judgment to unplug the acoustic feedback loop of our own anxiety. We manipulated the vagus nerve through intentional exhalation to force the autonomic nervous system into a parasympathetic state. And finally, we triggered the mammalian care system using unconditional self-acceptance to neutralize the cortisone-driven threat of perfectionism.
It is a remarkable synthesis of ancient meditative practice and what we now understand about modern neuroscience. The text inherently understands that you cannot logic your way into sleep. You have to create the precise physiological and emotional conditions under which sleep becomes the inevitable byproduct.
And so for anyone listening, just remember you can access this gentle encounter with yourself anytime. You don't always need a script or a singing bowl. You just need to remember to permit yourself to drop your armor and just be.
Absolutely. Give yourself that permission.
But, while this text is specifically designed for the transition into night, it actually leaves me with a lingering question about how we manage our transitions into the day.
Oh, that's an interesting pivot.
Well, think about it. This script uses the cover of darkness and the end of our required daily productivity as the justification to grant ourselves permission to be imperfect. It relies on the logic that, the day is done, therefore I can drop my defenses.
Sure, the environmental cues of night certainly make that cognitive shift easier to justify to a hyper-vigilant brain.
But consider the exact opposite end of the timeline. The moment we wake up, we experience what endocrinologists call the cortisol awakening response. Our brain immediately floods our system with stress hormones to get us out of bed and ready to face the demands of the day.
It does.
Within seconds, we put the heavy psychological armor right back on. We immediately start judging our upcoming tasks, anticipating our interactions, and demanding perfection from ourselves for the next 16 hours.
It is a jarring physiological spike. And for many people, it sets a baseline tone of anxiety that persists until they attempt to execute a wind-down routine like the one we've just analyzed.
Exactly. So my provocation for you, the listener, to mull over is this. What would happen if we didn't wait for the darkness to grant ourselves this grace?
I love that.
What if we attempted to apply the exact same no judgment, no expectation framework to the very first 5 minutes of our morning? Instead of letting the cortisol awakening response dictate an immediate return to hypervigilance and self-criticism, what if we met our waking selves with the radical acceptance that the current you is the best you?
That would be revolutionary for a lot of people.
Could intercepting that morning stress cascade with the same mammalian care system we use at night fundamentally alter our baseline neurological state for the entire day? It might be the ultimate test of whether we truly believe our worth is independent of our output.
That is a brilliant thought to end on. It really challenges the whole paradigm of how we start our days.
It does. Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today. Take care of yourselves, be gentle with yourselves tonight, and maybe tomorrow morning, too. We'll catch you next time.